Chapter 1. The Dust of Silence. The rain in the dragon's tooth. District tasted of soot and regret. It slicked the narrow alleyways, reflecting the flickering lanterns in a bruised, oily sheen. Kael didn't notice. He was lost in the tremor of a single string, coaxing a mournful, fractured melody from his ancient lyre, a thing of scarred maple and tarnished silver, a ghost of 1,000 wealthier instruments. His fingers, perpetually raw and stained with rosin, danced across the strings with a delicate precision that belied the coarse wool of his tunic. He was mute, officially. A childhood fever had stolen his voice, leaving behind a persistent ringing in his ears and a profound quietude. The city, a cacophony of merchants hawking wares, children shrieking, and temple bells ringing, simply flowed around him. The locals considered him a curiosity, a sad, silent artist, but largely ignored him. He was, after all, just another smudge in the underbelly of the capital, Liangzhou. Kael's true life was a carefully constructed illusion. He was Kaelan, heir to the Kaelan Merchant Guild, a dynasty woven into the very fabric of the empire. They controlled the flow of silk from the western provinces, the spice trade with the southern kingdoms, and held a significant, if discreet, influence over the emperor's coffers. More importantly, he carried a secret, a power so ancient and potent it felt like a living thing coiled within his bones, the vibrating cord. It wasn't merely martial arts, it was a mastery of sonic manipulation. Through precise control of his breath and body, he could generate and channel resonant frequencies, capable of shattering stone, accelerating healing, and even, as he was only beginning to understand, altering the very structure of matter. The guild had guarded the cord for generations, a weapon and a legacy, passed down through a lineage of silent masters. Kael was the latest, and, perhaps, the most reluctant. He chose this life, this deliberate anonymity, as a shield. The boardrooms of the guild were a whirlwind of ambition, backstabbing, and the constant pressure to expand their influence. His father, Admiral Jian, a man carved from steel and duty, saw the vibrating cord as a tool for conquest, a means to secure the empire's borders. Kael, however, saw only the potential for destruction, the seductive allure of absolute power. Had fled the gilded cages of the guild's headquarters, seeking refuge in the grime and quiet desperation of the Dragon's Tooth district. A gruff voice startled him. "Still playing that cursed thing, mute?" It was Lord Valerius, a man whose self-importance was as disproportionate as his attempts at musical expression. Valerius, a devotee of the court lute, fancied himself a composer of considerable talent, though his compositions were less inspired and more like a discordant thunderstorm. He was a man obsessed with order, with precision, and utterly incapable of understanding the subtle beauty of Kael's music. Valerius, with a sneer, produced a small ornate flute from his pocket. "Let me demonstrate a proper melody," he announced, launching into a series of excruciatingly labored notes, punctuated by self-congratulatory flourishes. Kael ignored him, continuing to weave his melancholic tune. He deliberately avoided eye contact, focusing on the feeling of the lyre against his hand, the subtle shifts in air pressure as he manipulated the frequencies. "You waste your talents," Valerius finally sputtered, pausing mid-note. He approached Kael, his face flushed with indignation. "You are a disgrace, a mockery of artistry. The deaf are nature's mistakes, a void where sound should be." He then, with a flourish of cruel satisfaction, poured a vial of murky water over Kael's lyre, splattering the silver frame. "See? Useless. Just like you." Kael didn't flinch. He simply continued to play, the water's impact swallowed by the resonance of the strings. He didn't respond, didn't acknowledge the humiliation. It was a deliberate act, a refusal to give Valerius the satisfaction of a reaction. Suddenly, a small, hesitant voice cut through the rain and the noise. "Wait," the voice said softly. "Please, don't." Kael turned. Standing a few feet away was a young woman, her face smudged with soot, her clothes patched and worn, but her eyes bright with an unusual intelligence. It was Elara, a seamstress who worked 3 jobs to scrape together enough coin to buy medicine for her ailing mother. She operated a tiny stall on the corner, mending garments for the district's residents. Elara's eyes were fixed on Kael's hands, on the way he moved, on the delicate, almost reverent way he handled the ancient lyre. "There's a mechanical soul in you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The way you hold it, the way you play it's like you're not just moving your hands, but shaping the very air." Kael offered a hesitant, almost imperceptible nod, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a connection, a recognition that transcended words, a flicker of something akin to hope in the quiet expanse of his silence. He knew instinctively that this unassuming seamstress saw something within him, something far beyond the mute musician he presented to the world. And he suspected, with a growing sense of unease and burgeoning possibility, that she might be the key to unlocking the full potential of the vibrating chord, and the reckoning that was to come. Chapter 2. The Echo in the Stone. The rain hadn't truly stopped, clinging to the narrow alleys of the lower district like a sullen spirit. Kael continued his nightly performance, the cracked lyre a familiar weight in his hands. He played a mournful tune. A slow, resonant piece head composed himself, letting the vibrations settle in his bones, a cautious exercise in control. He hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since the humiliation at the festival, but he found himself increasingly drawn to Elara's presence, a silent, flickering flame against the perpetual gray of his existence. He noticed her stall first, a simple affair constructed of salvaged wood and canvas, tucked between a noodle vendor and a purveyor of dried fish. It wasn't the goods she sold, meticulously mended clothes, patched and vibrant, despite their worn appearance, that caught his attention, but the quiet focus with which she worked. Had observed her for weeks, a ghost in the periphery, fascinated by the precision and artistry she brought to her trade. Then she spoke. "Wait," the voice said softly. "Please don't." Kael turned. Standing a few feet away was a young woman, her face smudged with soot, her clothes patched and worn, but her eyes bright with an unusual intelligence. It was Elara, a seamstress who worked 3 jobs to scrape together enough coin to buy medicine for her ailing mother. She operated a tiny stall in the corner, mending garments for the district's residents. Elara's eyes were fixed on Kael's hands, on the way he moved, on the delicate, almost reverent way he handled the ancient lyre. "There's a mechanical soul in you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The way you hold it, the way you play it's like you're not just moving your hands, but shaping the very air." Kael offered a hesitant, almost imperceptible nod, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a connection, a recognition that transcended words, a flicker of something akin to hope in the quiet expanse of his silence. He knew, instinctively, that this unassuming seamstress saw something within him, something far beyond the mute musician he presented to the world. And he suspected, with a growing sense of unease and burgeoning possibility, that she might be the key to unlocking the full potential of the vibrating chord, and the reckoning that was to come. He didn't respond verbally, of course, but he subtly adjusted his posture, angling the lyre slightly towards her. He played a brief, fragmented chord, a rising arpeggio, attempting to convey a feeling of hesitant curiosity. Elara didn't flinch, didn't recoil. Instead, she reached out a tentative hand, her fingers hovering inches from the strings. "It's complex," she whispered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Like a carefully tuned instrument, but capable of shattering." Suddenly, a gruff voice interrupted. "What are you doing, little seamstress? Staring at the fool again?" It was Boren, a burly street vendor known for his sour temper and penchant for collecting discarded coins. He lumbered over, eyeing Kael with suspicion. "Don't you have a trade to be practicing?" "A fool's trade, I might add." Kael remained silent, his focus entirely on Elara. He sensed a subtle shift in the air around her, a minute vibration he hadn't consciously created. He deliberately amplified the chord he was playing, increasing the intensity, experimenting. A faint shimmer appeared in the air above the lyre's strings, like heat rising from a forge. Boren, noticing the shimmer, let out a startled yell, stepping back. What in the heavens? Before he could fully process what had seen, a small pile of loose stones near his feet began to tremble, then levitated momentarily before shattering into a fine dust. Boren scrambled back, knocking over a stack of clay pots. "Magic!" he shouted, fear replacing his annoyance. "This musician is a sorcerer." Elara, however, remained calm, her eyes wide with an understanding that bordered on awe. "The vibrations," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rain. "You're channeling them consciously." Just as Kael was contemplating how to respond, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, a man clad in the livery of Lord Valerius. "Interesting," he drawled, his voice laced with a mocking tone. "A mute musician with a penchant for destructive displays. Tell me, Soundweaver, does your little hobby have a purpose beyond amusing the masses?" He produced a small, intricately carved wooden flute and began to play a discordant, irritating melody, deliberately attempting to disrupt Kael's concentration. Kael felt the vibrating chord stirring within him, a deep, resonant hum building to a crescendo. He knew he couldn't afford to react to Valerius' provocation, not yet. He looked to Elara, seeking a signal, a sign of understanding. She nodded subtly, a single deliberate movement that conveyed a crucial message focus. He closed his eyes, drawing on the immense power of the vibrating chord, not to attack, but to defend. The air around him thickened, vibrating with a raw, barely contained energy. The discordant notes of Valerius' flute faltered, sputtered, and vanished entirely. The rain seemed to quiet, as if holding its breath. Kael opened his eyes, his gaze locked on Valerius. "You seek to understand," he finally said, his voice a low, resonant rumble, the first words he'd spoken in months. "But you will find that some things are best left unseen." Chapter 3. Echoes of the Void. The silence following Kael's first spoken words hung heavy in the rain-slicked alleyway, a palpable thing that seemed to absorb the sounds of the city. Valerius, visibly thrown, retreated into a tight coil of barely controlled fury. The carved flute, still clutched in his hand, now seemed to vibrate with a nervous energy, mirroring the unsettling stillness around Kael. "Unseen," Kael repeated, the word echoing with a depth that felt older than the city itself. He wasn't simply speaking, he was shaping sound, layering it with intention, with a force that made the very air around them shimmer. Elara, standing a respectful distance away, observed with wide, fascinated eyes. She recognized the shift, the subtle alteration in the rain's flow, a slight blurring of edges, a momentary distortion of the shadows. "It's overwhelming," she whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the worn fabric of her shawl. "The power you hold." Kael didn't dismiss her observation. He extended a hand, palm open, and deliberately plucked another note from his cracked lyre. This time, instead of a single, focused vibration, a cascade of notes flowed, like water cascading down a stone wall, chaotic, yet possessing a strange, beautiful order. The rain intensified, becoming a sheet of silver, but instead of falling downwards, it seemed to swirl around them, drawn into the intricate patterns of sound. Valerius, startled by this sudden amplified display, instinctively flinched. The flute slipped from his grasp, clattering against the cobblestones. He scrambled to retrieve it, his face flushed with panic, but before he could regain control, Kael shifted his focus. He didn't attack. He absorbed. He channeled the discordant energy of the flute's melody, not to destroy, but to refine, to neutralize. The chaotic swirls of rain began to coalesce, forming a shimmering vortex around Valerius. "You misunderstand," Kael said, his voice now laced with an unnerving calmness. "The vibrating chord isn't merely about destruction. It's about balance. Every sound has an echo, a resonance. To silence one, you must understand its origin, its intent." As he spoke, a spectral image began to materialize within the vortex, a hazy, flickering representation of Valerius' earlier melody, twisted and corrupted, feeding back on itself. It felt less like a physical attack, and more like an interrogation, a probing of Valerius' own arrogance and desperate need to prove himself. Suddenly, a gruff voice cut through the stillness. "What in the heavens is going on here?" Standing at the mouth of the alleyway was Master Zhao, a renowned martial arts instructor and a former advisor to the emperor. He was a formidable figure, known for his ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty. He carried a simple, polished wooden staff, its surface etched with ancient symbols. Zhao's arrival was a jarring intrusion. Had been discreetly investigating rumors of a silent musician disrupting the city's elite, and had tracked Kael to this particular alleyway. Had been observing Kael's interactions with Valerius, intrigued by the young man's inexplicable power and the unsettling way he seemed to manipulate the environment. "Kaelin," Zhao said, his voice laced with disapproval, "this display is reckless. You are a danger to yourself and to those around you. The vibrating chord is a potent weapon, one that should be wielded with caution and discipline." Kael turned to face Zhao, a flicker of something akin to weary amusement in his eyes. "Discipline is a luxury I cannot afford, Master Zhao. The city is full of those who would exploit my silence, who would use me for their own gain. I use this reckless display to protect myself and those I care for." He glanced at Elara, and she offered a small, reassuring nod. Zhao remained unconvinced. "You are concealing something, Kaelin. I sense a depth of power within you that far exceeds your years. You are a storm waiting to break, and I intend to understand what you are truly hiding." He raised his staff, the etched symbols glowing with a faint, ethereal light. Before he could launch an attack, a new sound pierced the air, a high-pitched, shimmering tone, emanating not from Zhao's staff, but from Valerius' flute. The musician, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, frantically attempted to control the chaotic melody, but it was too late. The flute's energy, amplified by Kael's counter-resonance, spiraled out of his control, creating a dissonant, almost unbearable wave of sound. Kael immediately countered, weaving a web of his own vibrations, a defensive shield against the onslaught. The alleyway seemed to distort further, the rain intensifying into a blinding torrent, the shadows deepening into an oppressive void. As the cacophony reached its peak, Kael focused, channeling the vibrating chord not as a weapon, but as a conduit. He reached out, not with sound, but with intention, and began to unravel the chaotic energies surrounding them, absorbing it into himself. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the noise ceased. The rain fell normally again, the shadows retreated, and the air returned to a stillness that felt profoundly altered. Kael stood in the center of the alleyway, breathing heavily, his face pale, but his eyes alight with a newfound understanding. "You see," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "sound is not just noise. It is power. And silence is the greatest of all weapons." Chapter 4. Echoes of the Void. The silence following the chaotic crescendo in the alleyway was almost unnerving, a thick, viscous quiet that pressed against Kael's skin. The rain, now a gentle drizzle, seemed to wash away not just the grime of the city, but also the lingering residue of the battle, the distorted shadows, the almost seen echoes of the discordant energy. Elara, wide-eyed and trembling, reached out a hesitant hand, touching his arm. What was that?" she asked, her voice a fragile thread. Kael didn't immediately answer. He closed his eyes, focusing on the subtle vibrations within his own body, meticulously mapping the remaining traces of the energy he had absorbed. He felt it a resonance, a deep, humming presence within his core, a solidified echo of the chaotic music Valerius had unleashed. It was unsettling, beautiful, and utterly terrifying. "It was a reflection," he finally said, his voice still thin and unused. "A reflection of my power and of your own, Master Valerius." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Elara stared at him, her initial fear slowly giving way to a burgeoning comprehension. The casual dismissal, the mockery, the brute force, it all suddenly shifted, taking on a deeper, more profound meaning. This wasn't just a mute musician, he was something else. You controlled it?" she stammered, gesturing to the now calm alleyway. Kael nodded, a faint ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I didn't control it precisely. I attuned myself to it. The vibrating chord isn't merely about breaking things, Elara. It's about understanding the underlying patterns of existence, the frequencies that bind everything together." He picked up his cracked lyre, running a calloused finger along its ancient strings. "Sound, you see, is the architecture of reality." Suddenly, a sharp, insistent tapping echoed from the mouth of the alley. A figure emerged, Admiral Zhao, Kael's father, his face etched with a grim severity that bordered on fear. He was accompanied by 2 Imperial guards, their faces impassive, their hands resting on the hilts of their sabers. "Kaelin," Zhao barked, his voice booming with the authority of the Imperial fleet. This incident requires immediate attention. Lord Valerius has been apprehended. The Emperor demands a full report. And frankly, I'm still struggling to understand how a mute musician managed to dismantle an assassin's guild with a single instrument." He eyed Kael with suspicion, his gaze lingering on the lyre. "The Emperor is concerned about the potential for undisciplined power. He wants to ensure this vibrating chord is kept under strict control." Kael remained silent, observing Zhao with a cool detachment. He sensed a deeper current beneath the Admiral's bluster, a mixture of pride, anxiety, and a barely concealed fear of his son's abilities. "Father," Kael said, his voice gaining a touch of steel, "I assure you I intend to use my power responsibly, but I require understanding. This chaotic energy, this resonance, it's more than just a weapon. It's a key." He paused, looking directly at Zhao. "I believe Valerius attempted to tap into this power, but he lacked the sensitivity to wield it. He created a storm, a dissonance. I merely brought it to stillness." Just then, a high-pitched, shimmering tone, similar to the one that had erupted from Valerius' flute, pulsed from the depths of Zhao's own staff. The carved symbols glowed with an intense, ethereal light, mirroring the effect Kael had witnessed in the alleyway. This time, however, it wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate. "Father!" Zhao exclaimed, recoiling as if burned. "The staff! It's reacting! It's amplifying the resonance!" Kael's eyes narrowed, recognizing the unsettling pattern. Valerius didn't just tap into the energy, he imprinted it. He left a fragment of his own will, a corrupted echo within the staff. "It's trying to complete the cycle." Without warning, Kael moved, not with the swift, calculated violence of before, but with a fluid, almost meditative grace. He reached out, not to attack, but to touch the staff. He closed his eyes, channeling the vibrating chord, not to shatter the resonance, but to isolate it, to gently pull it free from the staff. The glowing symbols flickered violently, then abruptly dimmed. The shimmering tone ceased. The alleyway remained quiet, save for the steady rhythm of Kael's breathing. "The cycle is broken," he said, his voice now stronger, imbued with a newfound certainty. "The key to understanding this power, to controlling it, lies not in aggression, but in acceptance." He looked at Zhao, a quiet challenge in his eyes. "You fear my power, Father, because you don't understand it. And perhaps That fear is the greatest threat of all. As he spoke, Elara noticed something remarkable. The intricate patterns of the sandalwood music hall shed glimpsed in his mind's eye. The vibrant colors of the instruments she envisioned were now beginning to take shape around them, shimmering faintly in the rain-washed air. The silent music of Kael was beginning to weave itself into the fabric of reality. Chapter 5. The Echo of Creation. The rain in the capital had shifted from a sullen gray to a shimmering silver, reflecting the nascent magic that clung to Kael. The music hall, now solidified into a breathtaking space, hummed with an almost imperceptible vibration. Instruments, 1,000 harps, a dozen zithers, a chorus of drums, carved from jade, materialized with impossible grace, filling the space with the promise of unheard melodies. Elara, mesmerized, reached out and tentatively plucked a string on a tiny, exquisitely crafted flute. The note that resonated wasn't just sound. It was a feeling, a sense of profound peace, of ancient knowing. It's like Hes building the music from nothing, she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Kael, observing her reaction with a thoughtful frown, adjusted the control of his power. The vibrating chord isn't merely about destruction, Elara. It's about creation, about harmonizing with the fundamental frequencies of existence. This hall, it's an amplifier, a focus, but it requires a conductor, someone who understands the delicate balance. He turned his attention back to the staff, the source of the disrupted resonance. It sat on a low table, still faintly pulsing with a dark, unsettling energy. Valerius' ambition wasn't simply to harness the cord, he sought to steal it. He believed power was a weapon, a tool for domination. He didn't understand that true resonance is about connection, not control. Zhao, Kael's father, a man sculpted by duty and centuries of Kaelan merchant power, stood rigidly beside him, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. The Admiral's initial outrage, a furious demand for answers, for reparations, had been tempered by the sheer impossibility of what He'd witnessed. He'd seen his heir, the boy who'd spent years hidden in the shadows, effortlessly dismantle a deadly assassin's guild with nothing but a silent note. "Father," Kael said, his voice laced with a gentle insistence, "the staff isn't an enemy. It's a wound, a manifestation of Valerius' corrupted intent. We can heal it." "Heal it?" Zhao scoffed, his hand instinctively reaching for the ornate hilt of his sword. "You speak of magic, Kael, but I speak of pragmatism. This power, this vibrating cord, it's too volatile. It could unravel the very fabric of our empire." "And what is the fabric made of, father?" Kael countered, gesturing to the music hall, to the instruments shimmering with life. "Harmonics, vibrations. We can channel this power, guide it, shape it." Suddenly, the air in the music hall shifted again. The instruments began to subtly rearrange themselves, forming a complex, swirling pattern that resembled a celestial map. As they shifted, the rain outside intensified, coalescing into a series of intricate patterns on the roof, perfect replicas of the geometric designs within the hall. "The staff isn't just reacting to the energy," Kael observed, his eyes narrowed, recognizing the unsettling pattern. "Valerius didn't just tap into the energy, he imprinted it. He left a fragment of his own will, a corrupted echo, within the staff. It's trying to complete the cycle." Without warning, Kael moved, not with the swift, calculated violence of before, but with a fluid, almost meditative grace. He reached out, not to attack, but to touch the staff. He closed his eyes, channeling the vibrating cord, not to shatter the resonance, but to isolate it, to gently pull it free from the staff. The glowing symbols flickered violently, then abruptly dimmed. The shimmering tones ceased. The alleyway remained quiet, save for the steady rhythm of Kael's breathing. "The cycle is broken," he said, his voice now stronger, imbued with a newfound certainty. "The key to understanding this power, to controlling it, lies not in aggression, but in acceptance." He looked at Zhao, a quiet challenge in his eyes. "You fear my power, father, because you don't understand it." And perhaps, that fear is the greatest threat of all. As he spoke, Elara noticed something remarkable. The intricate patterns of the sandalwood music hall shed glimpsed in his mind's eye. The vibrant colors of the instruments she envisioned were now beginning to take shape around them, shimmering faintly in the rain-washed air. The silent music of Kael was beginning to weave itself into the fabric of reality. A single, perfect rose bloomed on one of the zithers, its petals unfolding in a silent, mesmerizing dance. The room felt less like a building and more like a living, breathing composition. Kael turned to Zhao, his expression unreadable. "I believe," he said slowly, "that this isn't just about restoring balance, Father. It's about finding a new harmony, a new way to use this power not for dominion, but for understanding. The future of the Kael Merchant Guild, and perhaps the entire empire, depends on it." Chapter 6. The Echo of Silence. The rain in the capital had shifted. No longer a mournful sheet, but a shimmering curtain laced with the scent of ozone. It seemed the very air resonated with the quiet energy Kael had unleashed. The music hall, still in its nascent stages, pulsed with a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration. The artisans had brought in master luthiers, ivory carvers, silk weavers moved with a strange precision, guided not by instruction, but by an intuitive understanding of the space's evolving form. Zhao, initially stiff with apprehension, now observed Kael with a cautious curiosity. The younger man's stillness hadn't lessened, but it was different, imbued with a profound patience, a focused intensity that resonated with the intricate craftsmanship unfolding around them. Had been tasked with monitoring the flow of energy, a duty head approached with ingrained suspicion, meticulously charting fluctuations on a set of strangely shaped jade tablets. Now, he simply watched Kael, letting the silence speak for itself. "Father," Kael began, his voice carrying a resonance that wasn't simply vocal, but seemed to emanate from the very stones of the hall. "You asked why I didn't immediately destroy the shadow assassins. It wasn't a desire for power, but a reluctance to unleash a torrent of destruction. Vibrating chord isn't about brute force. It's about disrupting the underlying harmony, exposing the flaws in the resonance." He gestured towards a partially completed zither, its strings meticulously tuned to a frequency that shimmered with an internal light. Imagine a discordant note played on a perfectly crafted instrument. It doesn't simply break the instrument, it reveals the instability within its construction. The assassination was a carefully constructed resonance sphere, aggression, the desire for control. My aim was to gently unravel that resonance, to show them and myself the fragility of their intentions. Elara, who had been sketching the rose that bloomed on the zither in a worn leather-bound notebook, looked up, her brow furrowed. "But shattering their blades? That felt incredibly powerful." Kael smiled, a fleeting expression that softened his features. "The blades were merely a symptom, Elara. The true threat was the underlying belief, the conviction that violence was a solution. The shattering wasn't about destruction. It was about revealing the emptiness behind the act. It was a demonstration, a stark articulation of the chaos they sought to impose." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, settling on Zhao's jade tablets. "Zhao, I believe you've detected a remarkable shift. The resonance within this space isn't merely increasing, it's becoming layered, complex." Zhao, after a moment of concentrated observation, nodded slowly. "The fluctuations are erratic, but undeniably patterned. It's as if the music itself is creating its own harmonics, drawing in echoes from the past, from the very foundation of this land." Kael turned back to the music hall, his fingers gently tracing the curves of a sandalwood flute. The vibrating chord isn't just a martial art, it's a key to unlocking the inherent resonance within everything: stone, wood, even the human spirit. My ancestors discovered that this power could be used to repair, to heal, to create as much as it could destroy. The guild's obsession with control, with profit, has warped its purpose. They focused on the destructive potential, forgetting the profound beauty of balance. Suddenly, the rose on the zither shimmered with an intense, blinding light. The entire hall seemed to vibrate, not with an earthquake, but with a pure, crystalline tone that resonated deep within the bones. Kael closed his eyes, focusing his energy, carefully manipulating the interwoven frequencies. He wasn't striving to control the sound, but to listen to it, to become one with its flow. Attempting to refine the resonance, he said, his voice a hushed whisper, to bring clarity to the chaos. Then, he began to play, not with his hands on the lyre but with his breath. A single, sustained note, incredibly pure, filled the hall. It wasn't a deliberate composition, but a spontaneous outpouring of the energy he channeled. The sandalwood walls seemed to drink in the sound, the colors of the instruments intensifying, deepening. The rain outside ceased entirely, as if acknowledging the sanctity of the space. Zhao, his face pale, stared at the jade tablets in his hands. They were no longer displaying chaotic fluctuations, but a complex geometric pattern, a musical notation unlike anything he had ever seen. It's communicating, he stammered. A language of vibrations, of frequencies, a symphony of creation. Kael opened his eyes, a look of profound understanding dawning on his face. The true wealth of the Kaelan Merchant Guild isn't in trade routes or bank accounts, he said, his voice laced with a quiet conviction. It's in the potential for harmony, the potential for resonance. He looked at Elara, a gentle smile gracing his lips. And you, Elara, possess a rare sensitivity to this power, a natural connection to the underlying rhythm of the world. Perhaps you hold the key to unlocking the true potential of the vibrating chord. Chapter 7. The echo of Dragons. The Sandalwood Music Hall, christened Resonance by Kael, had become a hub of unsettling fascination. The imperial fleet, normally a symbol of ruthless efficiency, now cautiously observed the goings-on within. Admiral Zhao himself, a frequent visitor, meticulously recording Kael's every breath, every subtle shift in the lyre's ancient wood. The source of their unease was not simply the sheer impossibility of Kael's abilities, but the growing insistence that the vibrating chord wasn't merely a martial art, it was a key, a conduit to something profoundly ancient and powerful. Kael, meanwhile, was struggling. The initial burst of raw resonance, the exhilarating liberation of the sovereign of resonance, was fading. The geometric patterns on the jade tablets, once a vibrant map of musical potential, were now flickering with erratic static. Had discovered a frustrating limitation. The more he attempted to consciously shape the sound, the more it resisted, pushing back with an almost sentient force. It's like trying to hold water in my hands, he explained to Elara one evening, his face drawn with concentration as he coaxed a hesitant note from the lyre. The energy isn't something to be commanded. It's something to be understood, felt. Focusing too much on the outcome, not the journey. Elara, sitting beside him, her hands patiently tracing the intricate carvings of the lyre's frame, offered a quiet observation. You're trying to build the resonance, Kael. But the resonance already exists. It's in the stone, in the rain, in the tremor of a sparrow's wing. You need to find the pathway to it, not force your way through. Suddenly, the room pulsed with a low thrum, a vibration that wasn't generated by the lyre, but seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the hall. The air shimmered, and the rain outside intensified, hammering against the sandalwood walls with a frantic energy. Kael instinctively braced himself, his hands hovering over the lyre, and began to exhale. This time, the sound wasn't a single note, but a complex cascading wave of tones, weaving a tapestry of dissonance and harmony. As the sound swelled, the jade tablets erupted in a blinding white light. When the light subsided, the patterns had shifted completely, not to a geometric notation, but to a series of swirling, dragon-like forms. The very air around them seemed to coalesce, taking shape, until, before their eyes, a miniature dragon, woven from pure sonic energy, materialized, circling the music hall in a silent, breathtaking dance. Zhao, who had been scribbling furiously in his notebook, let out a choked gasp. "Impossible!" he exclaimed, his face ashen. The text they spoke of dragon echoes, guardians of ancient resonance, but they were considered mere legend. This is the embodiment of the Kaelan power. Kael felt a surge of exhilaration, mixed with a profound sense of unease. The dragon, though intangible, possessed a palpable power, a raw, untamed energy that threatened to overwhelm him. He realized with chilling clarity that the vibrating chord wasn't just about manipulating sound, it was about summoning and controlling forces beyond human comprehension. "This is not a weapon," he said, his voice strained. "It's a key to a power that has slumbered for millennia." He turned to Elara, his eyes filled with a newfound urgency. "You said you felt a connection. It's stronger than I realized. You are a focal point." As he spoke, the dragon's movements grew more erratic, its swirling form intensifying. The hall began to tremble, and a deep, guttural hum resonated through the air, a sound that seemed to vibrate not just in their ears, but in their very bones. Then, with a final deafening roar, a roar of pure resonance, the dragon lunged. Not with claws or teeth, but with a concentrated blast of sound that shattered the windows and sent everyone sprawling to the floor. When Kael recovered, he found Elara kneeling beside him, clutching her head, her face pale with shock. But it wasn't just the physical impact that had affected her. She was seeing things, flashes of images, moments from the distant past, overlaid onto the present. She saw the music hall itself rising from the earth, a temple dedicated to the dragon echoes, a civilization built on harmonic resonance. "The echoes they're showing me," she whispered, her voice filled with a haunting awe. The Kaelan weren't just manipulating sound. They were remembering it. They were listening to the heartbeat of the world, and they were part of it. Kael understood then the sovereign of resonance wasn't merely a warrior. He was a conduit, a link to a lineage that stretched back to the dawn of creation, a lineage charged with protecting the delicate balance between harmony and chaos. The arrogant Lord Valerius, with his petty attempts at musical imitation, was merely a symptom of a deeper, more fundamental failing, a failure to understand the true nature of power. As the last echoes of the dragon's roar faded, Kael knew his life was forever changed. He wasn't just the heir to a wealthy merchant guild, he was the guardian of a forgotten legacy, burdened with a power that could reshape the world and a responsibility to ensure it wouldn't be lost to the clamor of ambition. Chapter 8. The serpents scaled the sandalwood of the music hall, hummed with a subtle resonance, a lingering echo of the sovereign's power. Elara, still shaken from her experience, sat sketching furiously in a small, leather-bound book, attempting to capture the fragmented images that danced behind her eyes. Kael, observing her with quiet intensity, adjusted the tuning of his lyre, producing a series of delicate, almost crystalline notes that seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but within the very stone of the room. "It's overwhelming," she finally said, tearing a page from her book. "The visions aren't just visual. I feel them. A profound sadness, a terrible beauty, and a constant, underlying current of movement. Like a river, but not of water, of sound." Kael nodded, his expression grave. The dragon echoes were not merely a civilization, Elara. They were a living symphony. They harnessed the earth's vibrational energy, manipulating it to create, to heal, and to defend. Their artistry wasn't just about creating beautiful music, it was about weaving themselves into the fabric of reality. He explained, for the first time in detail, the mechanics of the vibrating chord. It wasn't just about shattering objects with sonic force. It was about understanding the fundamental frequencies of existence, the hum of the earth, the breath of the wind, the rhythm of life itself. A skilled practitioner could use this knowledge to amplify and redirect these energies, accelerating healing, creating protective barriers, or even temporarily altering the flow of time by manipulating the localized vibrational field. The lyre, he continued, carefully adjusting a string, is a focusing tool. It amplifies my innate sensitivity, allowing me to channel the vibrating chord with greater precision. But it's the breath, Elara. The breath is the key. He closed his eyes, took a deep, measured breath, and released a focused pulse of sonic energy. The air shimmered, and a single jasmine blossom on a nearby table bloomed instantly, its fragrance intensifying tenfold before returning to its natural state. You saw the temple, Kael said, his voice low, because of the resonance left behind by the dragon echoes. Their music wasn't just an art form, it was a ritual, a connection to something older, something profoundly powerful. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic scent filled the air. A low growl resonated from the hallway outside the music hall. Kael instantly recognized the sign, a scaled obsidian object, no larger than his palm, that had discovered nestled within the lyre's case, pulsing with a dark energy. It was a serpent scale, a relic of the dragon echoes, used to detect and disrupt vibrational imbalances. Someone knows, he said, his hand instinctively reaching for his lyre. Someone is trying to suppress the echoes. Before he could react, the door burst open, and Lord Valerius, accompanied by 3 burly guards, strode into the music hall. Valerius, emboldened by his recent, albeit humiliating, success with the city's music students, wore a smug expression. Well, 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 he sneered, gesturing dismissively around the room. The mute musician finally reveals his little tricks. I anticipated this. I've been monitoring your eccentricities. He held up a small, intricately crafted device, a resonator, designed to mimic and counteract the effects of the vibrating chord. This, my dear Kael, will neutralize your harmonic weapon. As Valerius activated the resonator, a wave of discordant noise flooded the room, a grating, chaotic vibration that slammed against Kael's senses. He staggered, clutching his head, struggling to maintain control of the vibrating chord. The jasmine blossom withered instantly. Elara, however, was not affected. The fragments of the dragon echoes within her mind coalesced, forming a shield of shimmering resonance. The echoes are protecting me, she cried, instinctively reaching out, her hands glowing with a pale ethereal light. Kael understood then Valerius wasn't merely trying to disrupt his power, he was attempting to sever Elara's connection to the dragon echoes. He launched himself towards Valerius, his movements a blur of controlled energy. He didn't attack with a blast of sound instead. He used the vibrating chord to subtly manipulate the air currents around Valerius, creating a pressure gradient that forced the resonator from Valerius' hand and sent it clattering across the floor. But Valerius wasn't defeated. He activated a hidden mechanism in his arm, revealing a smaller, more concentrated resonator, a miniature serpent scale, pulsating with dark energy. He aimed it directly at Elara, intending to overload her senses. Before the device could fire, Kael unleashed a wave of controlled sonic energy, a concentrated blast of pure, resonant frequency that shattered the miniature serpent's scale into 1,000 shimmering fragments and sent Valerius sprawling to the floor, his face contorted in a silent scream. As the last echoes faded, Elara looked at Kael, a newfound understanding in her eyes. You're not just a warrior, Kael, she whispered. You're a keeper, a guardian of something truly ancient and profound. And I think I'm starting to understand why. Chapter 9. The Symphony of Stone, the Sandalwood Music Hall, christened Echo's Embrace, was nearing completion. The scent of polished wood and exotic raisins hung heavy in the air, a deliberate counterpoint to the grime and desperation of the district Kael had once known. Elara, invigorated by her mother's miraculous recovery, moved with a newfound purpose, guiding the artisans with an almost instinctive understanding of their craft. It was a strange, beautiful contrast, the quiet seamstress, orchestrating the creation of a space that resonated with the very power she was only beginning to grasp. Kael, meanwhile, was consumed by a relentless study of the vibrating chord. The initial reveal at the Imperial Arts Festival had been a terrifying, exhilarating surge, a torrent of sensation he hadn't known existed. Had spent weeks attempting to articulate the mechanics, to bind the chaotic energy into a controlled flow. His training had been instinctive, honed over generations, yet now, he felt the need for precision, for understanding. He built a series of resonating chambers within the estate, meticulously carved from granite and quartz, each designed to amplify and refine the sonic frequencies he generated. One evening, Elara found him in the largest chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a colossal, hand-hewn stone bowl DT. He was motionless, his face serene, his hands hovering over the bowl, seemingly generating nothing. "You're doing nothing, Kaelin," she said, her voice soft. "You've been at this for 3 days. I brought you lotus tea, but you haven't even stirred." He didn't respond, merely continued to focus. After a moment, he began to pluck at the bowl with a meticulously crafted bone stylus, not producing a sound, but manipulating the vibrations within the stone. The air shimmered, and the very floor beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm. In trying to understand the stone's song, he finally said, his voice a low rumble, barely audible. "The earth itself holds echoes. This bowl, it's a key. Attempting to unlock them." Elara watched, fascinated. Shed noticed a peculiar pattern emerging, a complex layering of tones that seemed to correspond with the geological formations of the surrounding mountains. "It's beautiful," she admitted, almost sentient. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, not violently, but with a slow, deliberate vibration that resonated deep within their bones. The stone bowl started to hum, the sound intensifying until it became a palpable force. Cracks spider-webbed across the stone floor, and from the fissures, miniature crystalline structures, perfect replicas of the bowl, began to sprout. "The echoes are awakening," Elara cried, instinctively reaching out, her hands glowing with that familiar pale light. Kael reacted instantly, stepping forward, placing a hand on the bowl. He channeled his energy, not with a forceful blast, but with a delicate manipulation of the sound, guiding the chaotic resonance into a controlled flow. The miniature bowls ceased their proliferation, retracting back into the cracks. The tremors subsided, leaving behind an unnerving silence. "The stone song resists control," Kael said, his voice strained. "It's not a weapon. It's a conversation, a plea for balance." Just then, a tremor shook the entire estate. This one was different, deeper, more insistent. It wasn't the earth trembling, it felt like something within the earth was responding. A section of the estate's perimeter wall, a wall built centuries ago, began to glow with an eerie, internal luminescence. Stone fragments levitated, swirling around a point just above the ground, before coalescing into a perfect miniature replica of a dragon. It was ancient, impossibly detailed, and radiated a palpable heat. Lord Valerius emerged from the shadows, accompanied by a contingent of guards. He wasn't attempting to attack. Instead, he was observing the dragon with an almost religious reverence. "Impressive, isn't it?" he said, his voice devoid of mockery, surprisingly calm. A fragment of the dragon echoes. "I've spent years attempting to understand its resonance." Kael recognized the serpent scale around Valerius' wrist, pulsing with dark energy. "You've been attempting to corrupt it," Kael accused, his voice hardening. Valerius simply smiled. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I was simply learning to amplify its potential." He raised the device, aiming it not at Elara, but at the miniature dragon. The air shimmered, and the dragon emitted a deafening shriek, its form dissolving into a cloud of iridescent dust. "You think you understand harmony, Kaelin?" Valerius sneered. "You merely believe in a single note." The true symphony is chaos, destruction, a force unbound by restraint. As the last echoes of the dragon's disintegration faded, Kael realized the horrifying truth. Valerius hadn't been seeking to disrupt his power, had been attempting to destroy the very foundations of the vibrating chord, to silence the echoes of the past. And he wasn't just trying to silence them, he was trying to weaponize them. Chapter 10. The echoes of Steel the Sandalwood of the music hall felt cool against Elara's skin, a stark contrast to the simmering tension that had settled over the Kaelan estate. Kael had orchestrated a lavish unveiling, a calculated display designed to solidify his position, a position he hadn't earned, yet held with an unnerving authority. The assembled dignitaries, merchants, and imperial officials buzzed with polite, cautious admiration, their eyes constantly flitting between Kael and the magnificent hall, a testament to his sudden wealth. Valerius, predictably, was a thorn in his side. He stood rigidly near the entrance, his serpent scale pulsing a sickly violet under the filtered sunlight, a silent, menacing presence. He hadn't attempted to challenge Kael directly, but his disdain was palpable, radiating outwards in a wave of subtle gestures, a curtain nod to a particularly influential official, a dismissive flick of his wrist. Curious choice of decor, Heir Kaelan, Valerius said, his voice laced with honeyed mockery. Sandalwood, a wood known for its fragility. You seem to prioritize beauty over defense. Kael ignored the jab, focusing instead on the intricate mechanism dominating the center of the music hall, a vast circular platform constructed of polished obsidian, overlaid with a network of vibrating brass rods. It was a resonance amplifier, a device of incredible complexity, far surpassing anything Head ever seen. I believe, Kael said, his voice carefully neutral, that beauty can be a powerful defense. A distraction, perhaps, or a focus for a more precise application of force. Valerius' lips curled into a knowing smile. Such elegant phrasing, Kaelan. You're learning. But you misunderstand the fundamental principles. Resonance isn't about controlling a single note, it's about disrupting the entire harmonic chain. It's about shattering the foundations upon which reality itself is built. He gestured towards the amplifier. This device allows me to weaponize those dissonances, to amplify the chaotic echoes of destruction you so desperately try to contain. Elara, seated on a plush silk cushion, watched the exchange with a growing sense of dread. She understood instinctively that Kael wasn't merely fighting a political rival, he was confronting a force far more ancient and dangerous. Valerius wasn't seeking power, he was seeking oblivion. Suddenly, a low hum filled the hall, escalating in intensity. The brass rods of the amplifier began to vibrate violently, the obsidian platform shimmering with an unsettling purple light. The assembled officials shifted uneasily, murmuring amongst themselves. As attempting a destabilization, Kael stated, his hand instinctively reaching for the cracked lyre strapped to his back. As attempting to overload the ambient resonance, to induce a cascading effect of structural failure. Before Kael could act, Valerius unleashed his attack. He hadn't moved towards the amplifier directly. Instead, had been subtly manipulating the vibrations of the entire hall, amplifying the subtle tremors of the stone floor, the creaks of the aged wood, the murmurs of the crowd. It was a wave of chaotic energy, a discordant symphony designed to unravel the very fabric of reality. Kael reacted instantly. Closing his eyes, he entered the vibrating chord, the familiar rush of energy flooding his senses. He didn't attempt to counter Valerius' attack with a forceful, directed vibration. Instead, he did something far more radical. He absorbed it. He began to play. Not a conscious melody, but a raw, instinctive outpouring of sonic energy. A desperate attempt to harmonize the chaos. The cracked lyre, unexpectedly, resonated with a power that dwarfed its age. The air shimmered, distorting the light, as Kael pulled the strings, unleashing a torrent of interwoven frequencies. The obsidian platform began to spin faster, its vibrations intensifying. The brass rods fractured, showering the floor with shimmering sparks. But it wasn't Valerius' chaos that was being consumed, it was amplified. Kael wasn't just neutralizing the dissonance, he was channeling it, shaping it, refining it into something else. Then, a sound emerged. Not a chord, not a note, but a pulse. A deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but within the very bones of everyone present. As the pulse intensified, miniature dragons, identical to the one Valerius had destroyed, began to coalesce around Kael, dozens of them, swirling and shimmering, each radiating an intense heat. They weren't miniature replicas, they were active, independent entities, miniature conduits of raw, untamed resonance. Valerius' face went white, his eyes widening in horror. "Impossible," he stammered, the serpent's scale flaring violently. "You can't control it." The echoes there becoming autonomous. Kael didn't stop playing. He continued to weave the chaotic resonance into a tapestry of power, his eyes burning with an almost terrifying intensity. The music hall, once a symbol of Kaelan wealth and ambition, was becoming a crucible, forging a weapon of unimaginable potential. He wasn't just a mute musician hiding a powerful secret, he was a vessel, a living conduit for the echoes of a forgotten god. The final note resonated, and with a blinding flash of light, the miniature dragons vanished, leaving behind only a lingering scent of ozone and the unmistakable sound of shattered reality. Valerius, paralyzed with fear, collapsed to his knees, the serpent's scale falling silent. Chapter 11. The Cartographer of Chaos. The silence after the flash was thick, almost tangible, pressing down on the newly rebuilt music hall like a suffocating velvet curtain. The air shimmered with residual energy, and a fine, iridescent dust coated everything: the sandalwood panels, Elara's newly crafted harp, even the hesitant fingers of the students nervously sketching in their notebooks. Kael stood motionless, his cracked lyre held aloft, the wood now pulsing with a faint internal light. He hadn't spoken in months, but the intensity in his eyes was a language far more potent than any spoken word. Admiral John, Kael's father, knelt before him, his face etched with a mixture of awe and profound unease. The once proud man, a figure of immense authority and ruthless efficiency, looked utterly diminished, stripped of his usual command and replaced by a supplicant. "My son," he finally managed, his voice strained. "What was that?" Kael didn't answer directly. Instead, he carefully placed the lyre on a velvet cushion, a gesture of deliberate control amidst the lingering chaos. He slowly brought a hand to his chest, a subtle movement that seemed to gather the remaining vibrations within him. "It is not merely sound, Father," he said, his voice a low, resonant murmur, generated not through his vocal cords, but through a manipulation of the air itself. "It is the echo of existence, solidified and shaped. The potential for creation and destruction contained within every vibration." He gestured toward the sprawling maps that lined the walls of the music hall, charts meticulously detailing trade routes, geological formations, and, strangely, the locations of subtle seismic tremors across the empire. The vibrating chord is a cartography of reality itself, a way to understand the underlying structure of the universe, and, more importantly, to alter it. Suddenly, a young scholar, Master Lin, a man known for his meticulous adherence to established martial arts doctrine, stepped forward, his face pale. "But the dragons," he stammered, gesturing towards the intricate miniature scrolls displayed on a rolling cart, meticulously copied versions of the dragon's head created. "You summon them. They are not merely echoes, they are autonomous beings, capable of independent action. The vibrating chord is not just a martial art, it's a summoning ritual." Kael's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, perhaps regret, perhaps calculation, crossed his eyes. The echoes crave order, he explained, his voice gaining a subtle, hypnotic quality. They resonate with patterns, with structure. The act of creation, of imposing a rhythm, stabilizes them. But excessive control breeds rigidity. A controlled resonance can be beautiful, powerful, but unchecked, it becomes a maelstrom. He began to play again, a simple, melancholic melody on the lyre. This time, the air shimmered with a different quality, not a violent disruption, but a subtle bending of light, a distortion of space itself. As the music flowed, several of the miniature dragons, dormant scrolls, began to subtly shift, rotating on their stands, rearranging themselves in intricate patterns. Valerius, who had been dragged back to the music hall under guard, watched with a renewed, terrifying understanding. Had been a fool to underestimate Kael, a fool to dismiss the deaf man's nonsense. The serpent scale, a legendary artifact designed to absorb and neutralize vibrations, flared with an erratic, unstable light, as if struggling against the encroaching resonance. "It's not a weapon," Valerius choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's a gateway. You're opening a door to something beyond our comprehension." Kael ceased playing, and the swirling dragons paused, hovering in the air like iridescent jewels. He turned to Elara, who stood silently by his side, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Elara," he said, his voice soft, "I need your help." He indicated the maps. "I have been studying these tremors, the subtle shifts in the Earth's energy. I believe these miniature dragons, once properly trained, can be used to direct them, to prevent disasters, to protect the Empire." He paused, and a new realization dawned on him. He hadn't merely mastered the vibrating chord, he was evolving it. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a cartographer of chaos, a conductor of unseen forces, capable of shaping the very fabric of reality. "This," he said, his gaze sweeping across the music hall, encompassing the maps, the scrolls, the assembled scholars, and finally Elara, "is only the beginning." He lifted his hand, and a single miniature dragon detached itself from the swirling mass and hovered before him, its eyes gleaming with an ancient, unsettling intelligence. "We will learn to control it. We will learn to harness it. We will learn to build a world where discord does not destroy, but creates." Chapter 12. The Echo of Creation. The sandalwood of the music hall resonated with a quiet, almost unsettling harmony. Elara, now comfortably seated on a cushion woven with silver threads, meticulously transcribed Kael's pronouncements onto parchment, her movements precise and attentive. The miniature dragons, dubbed resonance keepers by Kael, were a constant, mesmerizing dance around the hall, their scales shimmering with 1,000 shifting colors, a visual echo of the power he commanded. Days bled into weeks, a rhythm of intense study and experimentation. Kael, still seemingly mute, directed the scholars, a collection of the Empire's most brilliant geomancers and acoustics arts, with an unnerving calm. He communicated through a complex system of gestures, diagrams sketched in charcoal, and the subtle shifts in the dragon's movements, a silent symphony of command and correction. Valerius, meanwhile, was a wretched spectacle. The admiral, his face perpetually etched with a mixture of shame and bewildered fury, forced the former lord into a grueling apprenticeship, demanding he meticulously adjust the delicate scales of a miniature gong, a task seemingly designed to break the arrogant musician's spirit. Kael occasionally observed Valerius' humiliation with a detached sadness, a flicker of something akin to pity in his dark eyes. It was during one particularly frustrating session, a torrent of discordant notes from Valerius triggering a chaotic burst of dragon activity, that Kael revealed the true depth of his evolution. He was no longer simply manipulating sound, he was learning to shape it, to weave it into the very architecture of space and time. "The tremors aren't random," he said, his voice, for the first time since his self-imposed exile, articulated with a deliberate, resonant cadence. They are echoes. Echoes of creation, of destruction, of the universe's constant striving. The vibrating chord isn't about shattering, it's about harmonizing. He directed the scholars to focus on a specific tremor, one centered beneath the Imperial Archives, a tremor that had plagued the city for decades, causing minor structural damage and unsettling the scholars within. Using a complex array of resonators and carefully calibrated dragon frequencies, Kael began to play the tremor. Not with a note, but with intention. The room filled with a palpable tension. The resonance keepers pulsed with a blinding light, the air thrumming with an energy that seemed to vibrate in the bones. Then, with a low, grinding sigh, the tremor ceased. The ground beneath the archives stabilized. Elara gasped, her eyes wide with understanding. Heshes silencing the scream of the earth. Kael simply nodded, his expression grave. This is just a beginning. The tremors are not isolated events. They are connected, forming a vast, interwoven tapestry of energy. To truly protect the Empire, we must learn to understand and control this tapestry. However, the control wasn't entirely his. As he deepened his work, a new, disturbing development occurred. The miniature dragons began to exhibit an unsettling autonomy. They no longer responded solely to his commands, but seemed to anticipate his intentions, sometimes even acting independently, creating intricate patterns of light and vibration that defied his conscious direction. During one late-night session, a particularly agitated resonance keeper detached itself from the group and floated directly towards Elara. It hovered before her, bathing her in an intense, shimmering light. Kael watched, a frown creasing his forehead, as the dragon pulsed with a strange, erratic energy, its light fluctuating wildly, as if struggling against a force he couldn't perceive. "Elara, retreat," he commanded, his voice strained. But it was too late. The dragon emitted a single piercing note, a note not of sound, but of pure vibration that slammed into Elara's mind. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her head, writhing in agony. Kael, reacting instantly, unleashed a torrent of the vibrating chord, a chaotic burst of sonic energy designed to neutralize the aberrant vibration. The room dissolved into a maelstrom of color and sound, the resonance keepers twisting and spiraling out of control. When the chaos subsided, Elara lay still, her eyes closed, a faint, shimmering residue clinging to her skin. He rushed to her side, kneeling beside her, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "Elara, can you hear me?" She slowly opened her eyes, her gaze unfocused, distant. "I saw something," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "A gateway, a reflection. It showed me everything. The birth of the world, the fall of empires, and the echoes of you." As she spoke, a single, iridescent scale detached itself from one of the resonance keepers and floated towards her. It settled on her hand, pulsing with a faint ethereal light. Kael stared at it, a dawning realization spreading across his face. "It's not a weapon," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's not just a gateway. It's a fragment of myself." The orb, previously a chaotic, unstable mess, now held a single clear note, as if finally having been nurtured. The discord was starting to find harmony. The Rich's ancient heir, disguised as a mute musician, was becoming something far more complex, far more powerful, and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 13. The Cartographer of Echoes. The shimmering scale remained on Elara's palm, a tiny incandescent island in the deepening dusk of the music hall. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to sync not just with her heartbeat, but with a deeper, older pulse buried within the very stone of the estate. Kael circled her, not with the frantic concern of a healer, but with the measured grace of an explorer, charting a new, bewildering landscape. Head spent his life manipulating sound, directing it like a river, But this was something different, a conscious, self-aware vibration. "You understand," he said, his voice still deliberately muted, but imbued with a new urgency. "The resonance keepers aren't just vessels of power. They're echoes. Echoes of every act of creation, every shattering destruction, every moment of intense emotion that has ever resonated across the world." Elara, still pale and shaky, slowly sat up, the scale clinging to her skin like a living jewel. A record," she whispered, her voice gaining a thread of clarity. "A record not just of events, but of intent. It showed me the ambition of Valerius, the fear that drove him, the shame he carried for his own weakness." Kael closed his eyes, focusing, drawing upon the vibrating cord. He didn't unleash a destructive surge this time, but rather a delicate, probing wave. He directed it towards Elara, and the scale responded, glowing brighter, projecting a holographic image onto the wall, a fragmented scene of the Imperial Arts Festival, but seen from a perspective utterly alien. He saw Valerius, not as the arrogant lord he presented himself to be, but a young boy, terrified of disappointing his father, desperately seeking approval through clumsy performances. "It's a map," Kael murmured, opening his eyes. "A cartographer of echoes. The keepers, and fragments like this scale, aren't tools of destruction. They're tools of understanding. To truly wield the vibrating cord, one doesn't simply break things, one harmonizes them." A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint, ethereal hum emanating from the scale. Suddenly, the music hall itself began to vibrate, not violently, but subtly, as if responding to the resonance. The sandalwood panels seemed to shift and flow, the air shimmering with an almost tangible energy. "It's reacting to you," Kael said, his voice tight with concentration. "The keepers are sentient, Elara. They respond to consciousness, to intent. You've touched one, you've awakened its potential." Just then, a tremor shook the estate. Not an earthquake, but a distinct disruption of the resonant energy. From the depths of the Kaelan archives, a vast library containing not just scrolls, but objects imbued with captured echoes, a swirling vortex of dark energy erupted, coalescing into a towering, spectral figure. It resembled a man, clad in ancient warrior armor, but its form flickered and distorted, constantly shifting and echoing with the sounds of forgotten battles. "A guardian," Kael breathed, instantly recognizing the entity. "A keeper of echoes, corrupted by centuries of isolation and rage." The guardian advanced, unleashing a wave of discordant sound, a cacophony of shattered swords, screaming soldiers, and the agonizing cries of the dying. Kael instinctively raised his cracked lyre, not to attack, but to counter. He began to play, not a furious assault, but a deliberate, calming melody, weaving a complex tapestry of sound designed to soothe the chaotic energy of the guardian. Elara, instinctively understanding the situation, reached out and gently touched the scale on her hand. The scale pulsed, amplifying her own resonance, adding a layer of clarity and compassion to Kael's composition. Together, they created a harmonious chord, a deliberate attempt to heal the fractured echo of this ancient warrior. As the melody intensified, the guardian paused, its flickering form momentarily stabilizing. It seemed to listen, recognizing the sincerity in their intention. Suddenly, a clear, echoing voice resonated from the guardian's form. "The dissonance. It seeks to silence the truth. You seek to understand, but understanding demands sacrifice." Kael understood. The guardian wasn't an enemy to be destroyed. It was a wound, a persistent echo of a tragic past that needed to be acknowledged, not suppressed. He lowered his lyre, meeting the guardian's spectral gaze. "Then, let us listen," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet power. "Let us chart the echoes and find the harmony within the dissonance." As the guardian began to speak, not in harsh commands, but in mournful recollections of battles long past, A new realization dawned on Kael. The vibrating cord wasn't simply a weapon or a healing tool. It was a key to unlocking the hidden history of the world, a key to understanding the very nature of existence itself. He was no longer just a mute musician hiding his power. He was becoming a cartographer of echoes, and Elara, unexpectedly, was his most valuable compass. Chapter 14. The cartographer's compass. The Sandalwood Music Hall, christened Resonance's Bloom, was a testament to Kaelin's swift and decisive shift in power. It wasn't a lavish display, a gilded cage of indulgence like his family's former residences. Instead, it was built with a quiet reverence, a space designed to nurture sound, to let it flow freely. Elara's mother, May, was already a quiet marvel, her fingers regaining a surprising dexterity as she tentatively experimented with a small, polished flute, a gift from Kael. The air within the hall thrummed with a subtle restorative energy, a constant, low-frequency hum that seemed to soothe the soul. Yet, the victory over the shadow assassins and the subsequent reveal of the vibrating cord had not gone unnoticed. Whispers had begun to circulate, carried on the wind, and traded in hushed tones amongst the court. Some hailed Kael as a divine instrument, a protector sent to deliver justice. Others viewed him with deep suspicion, fearing a hidden agenda, a dangerous manipulation of the emperor's trust. The imperial advisor, Master Jian, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with concern, summoned Kael to the emperor's private study, a room dominated by a colossal jade dragon statue that seemed to observe every movement. Master Kaelin, Jian began, his voice carefully measured. The sudden manifestation of such power has caused considerable disquiet. The whispers grow louder. We require a fuller explanation of the vibrating cord and its potential implications. He laid a scroll before Kael, covered in intricate diagrams depicting waveforms and harmonic ratios. Our scholars believe this cord is linked to ancient legends, the creation of sound itself, the manipulation of reality through sonic resonance. We believe it is a weapon of immense destabilizing potential. Kael, accustomed to being dismissed and treated as a curiosity, didn't rise to the bait of defensiveness. He examined the scroll with a detachment that bordered on melancholy. The legends are accurate, Master Jian, he said, his voice remarkably steady, a carefully constructed layer of calm over the vast reservoir of controlled power within him. The cord isn't merely a weapon. It's a language. It's a way of understanding the fundamental vibrations of the world, the echoes of creation and destruction. But why hide it? Jian pressed, his eyes narrowing. Why appear as a mute musician, a discarded curiosity, when you possess such capabilities? Kael paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath. He glanced towards Elara, who stood respectfully at the edge of the room, her hand resting on her mother's shoulder. The air around them shimmered slightly, a subtle indication of the cord's active state. I learned, Master Jian, that the loudest voices often drown out the most important truths. The pursuit of power, unchecked by compassion and understanding, leads only to chaos. I sought a way to observe, to listen, without being judged before acting, to understand the dissonances before attempting to create harmony. He continued, his voice gaining a subtle resonance. The assassins were not merely agents of the prince, they were echoes of a past conflict, a fractured cord of resentment and vengeance. My revelation was not a grand display of power, but a surgical intervention, a correction to a corrupted frequency. Suddenly, a rhythmic pulse of sound filled the room, growing stronger, more insistent. It wasn't Kael's playing, it was something else. Jian instinctively reached for a jade talisman, a device designed to dampen psychic interference, but it proved useless. The sound intensified, coalescing into a visible wave of energy that flowed from Kael's lyre, expanding outwards, enveloping the entire study. From within the wave, a figure materialized, not a spectral warrior, as they'd encountered before, but a woman, and possibly young, dressed in ancient silk robes. Her eyes burned with an unnerving intensity. "You have touched the source," she said, her voice a crystalline echo. "But the source has touched you." She extended a hand, and Kael instinctively reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The effect was immediate, overwhelming. Images flooded his mind, not memories of his own life, but a kaleidoscope of battles fought centuries ago, of devastating attacks and miraculous defenses, all orchestrated through the manipulation of sound. He saw himself, not as Kael the Heir, but as a figure known as Silas the Harmonist, a warrior revered as a god among sound, tasked with safeguarding the balance of the world. "The guardian is not a wound," the woman said, her voice layered with millennia of sorrow, "but a consequence. The cord is not merely a tool for healing, it is a tether. It links us to the echoes of every action, every thought, every intention. Your actions, Master Kael, have inadvertently awakened it." She turned her gaze to Elara. "And she, child, is the key." With a final shattering pulse of sound, the woman vanished, leaving behind only the lingering echo of her words and a profound sense of disorientation in Kael's mind. The jade talisman lay shattered on the floor. Kael stared at Elara, her eyes wide with a nascent understanding. He realized with chilling clarity that the compass had instinctively followed wasn't just guiding him, it was drawing him deeper into a mystery far older, and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The symphony of his life had just taken a profoundly dissonant turn. Chapter 15. The Resonance of Betrayal. The sandalwood of the music hall shimmered with an almost unsettling stillness. Elara, seated on a cushion embroidered with phoenixes, seemed to absorb the silence, her eyes fixed on the intricate carvings depicting the rise and fall of celestial melodies. Kael, however, remained restless, pacing the length of the room, the silence amplifying the frantic thrumming beneath his skin, the residual echo of the woman's revelation, the unearthed memories of Silas the Harmonist. "It's overwhelming," he finally said, his voice a rough murmur, unused to speaking aloud, a habit had consciously cultivated since his revelation. "This lineage, this power, it's a roaring ocean within me, and I barely know how to navigate a rowboat." Elara nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. The woman, she spoke of consequences, of the cord being a tether. She also said you'd inadvertently awakened it. That am the key. Kael stopped pacing, turning to her, a flicker of something akin to apprehension in his dark eyes. "You? But why me? I've spent my life hiding, trying to suppress this potential. Why would a simple musician, a mute, be linked to a god of sound?" A low, resonant chime emanated from a hidden mechanism within the wall, a subtle counterpoint to the silence. It drew his attention to a small, intricately carved jade box resting on a pedestal. He cautiously opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson silk, lay a single perfectly formed jade talisman, a miniature, stylized representation of a lyre. It pulsed with a faint inner light, mirroring the chaotic energy within him. "This," a voice rumbled, startling him, "is the Echo Stone. It's been dormant for centuries, attuned to the chord's resonance. Your touch, the disruption of the Imperial Arts Festival, it triggered a chain reaction, amplifying the stone's dormant potential. It sought a conduit, a vessel capable of channeling its power." The voice belonged to Admiral Zhao, Kael's father, who had arrived with a small contingent of Imperial Guard, a silent, imposing force that seemed entirely out of place in this opulent private space. He stood a respectful distance away, his face etched with a mixture of concern and a strange, unnerving understanding. "Your mother," he continued, his voice low and deliberate. "She was aware of your heritage. She concealed it from you, fearing the chaos it would unleash. She entrusted me with the task of safeguarding you, of preparing you for the inevitable." But she knew, too, that knowledge alone was not enough. You needed someone attuned. He gestured subtly towards Elara. Someone like her. Someone who wasn't burdened by the expectations of a powerful lineage, but possessed a sensitivity to the very fabric of sound. Kael felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a chilling realization. Elara wasn't simply a sympathetic soul. She was a vital component, a crucial key to unlocking the full potential of the vibrating chord. The woman's words echoed in his mind. She saw the fire in my soul when the world only saw the soot on my face. He hadn't simply rescued her head, drawn her into a destiny far beyond her comprehension. Suddenly, the music hall trembled. Not violently, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration. The air shimmered, and the carvings on the walls seemed to writhe with fleeting images, warriors wielding instruments of sound. Devastating attacks, miraculous cures. The echo stone in the jade box pulsed brighter, the light intensifying to a blinding white. "The chord is responding," Admiral Zhao said, his voice grim. "The connection is strengthening. But it's not stable. It's fighting back." A sharp, discordant note ripped through the air, originating not from a musical instrument, but from within Kael himself. He clutched his head, doubling over in pain, the flood of Silas memories, not just battles, but the crushing weight of responsibility, the agonizing burden of safeguarding the balance of the world. He could feel the echoes of countless lives, a cacophony of joy, sorrow, violence, and healing, all vying for dominance within his mind. Elara, surprisingly, remained calm. She stepped forward, extending a hand towards Kael. "Focus, Kaelin," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Don't fight it. Let the resonance flow through you. It's not a weapon to be wielded, but a river to be guided." As her fingers brushed against his, a wave of calming energy washed over him, momentarily silencing the chaotic torrent of memories. He focused on her, on the gentle warmth of her touch, and slowly, painstakingly, began to regain control. "Valerius," he muttered, the word a strangled whisper, "is not just a coward, as a disruption, an anti-resonance. His arrogance, his disdain, they're actively hindering the chord's function, is creating a dissonance." He looked at Elara, a newfound understanding dawning in his eyes. "And you, child, aren't just a key. You're an anchor. You're the counterpoint to his chaos." The echo stone in the jade box pulsed one last time, then fell silent, returning to its dormant state. The trembling subsided, and the music hall fell back into an uneasy, shimmering stillness. Kael knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was just the beginning. The unraveling of his life, the revelation of his heritage, had unleashed a force far greater than he could comprehend. And Elara, the mute musician, the disgraced seamstress, was now inextricably bound to its fate.